Any other questions? Yes.
I think it's really interesting, all the work you're doing in challenging unconscious and probably conscious bias. You talk a lot about terminology. How do you, it's all very well saying you can't call female surgeons bossy, but male surgeons are. How do you enact real change as opposed to just changing the terminology that people are using?
That's a great question. And it's really difficult. And again, one of the problems is it takes time. Because I'm guilty of it too. And the problem is there's the obvious stuff, which is obvious. And then there's the nuanced stuff, which takes real time, right? So if you come onto my ward and I say, all right, sweetheart, here's what we're going to do. Someone's going to call me out on that. Someone, if not that day, the next day is going to be like, yeah, no. But if you come to work with me and the patients keep thinking that you're the nurse and I never intervene and you never intervene, whose job is it? How do we do that? And it's even more difficult, of course, because some of it's learned behavior. We just role model. So some of it is just role modeling. And that's why a lot of this takes time, because you just have to role model these behaviors. And you have to be conscious about it. So I, for example, consciously now say, please, thank you, and sorry. As appropriate, obviously. But it's changed the way I work. So I overheard a conversation where someone said, all the fucking students want to go hang out in ortho and we can't work out why. And I kind of wanted to pipe up and be like, because now you're the dickheads. But it was because at the end of each case I go, team, before everyone goes for coffee, can I just say thanks? Thank you, everyone. And the first time I did it, everyone was like, that's creepy. It's because it's nearly like, have a nice day. But when was the last time someone thanked you? Like fucking ever, for doing anything at work. And when we screw up, there's a culture of like, fuck you, right? Whereas instead if you go, okay, team, thanks for that case. It was really, really tough. And can I just say that I am 99.9% certain that I think during that case I was kind of a dick. I think I shouted a couple of times. And I think I was just kind of not okay. Like, coffee's on me. I'm really sorry. I will try and do better next time. And the first time I did that, again, the person I was speaking to was like, please stop. You're making me really cringe. And I was like, but this is important because I was an asshole. And she was like, yeah, but I didn't mean yeah. But please stop apologizing. And I was like, no, it's important. And then you've got the next step. So then there's how to have difficult conversations. Now, not everyone can have every difficult conversation. I am aware that there are power gradients, some of which just can't be overcome. There are people I still can't challenge because I am still a trainee and I am still this and I am still that. There are other people I can challenge because some of the work I've done has given me a little bit more armor, and also because my, I hate this phrase, brand, is that I'm that guy, right? So if you are a complete loser and want to read an interesting paper, the Vanderbilt cup of coffee technique is great. So Vanderbilt came up with this theory that a lot of the time, again, when we challenge negative behaviors, we often finger point. Can I have a word with you in my office in 1 hour? Right? Shit. So what they found was it was a lot easier as your first step to go, could we grab a coffee? I think I've got about 5-10 minutes. I'll meet you in Costa, my shout. And then we sit down and I go, what's a good example? You're my SHO and you are totally like she for she. You want to bring more women into surgery. And this is a real story again. And I have to say to you, the thing is, the female students think you're being unfairly hard on them. And that you're kind of being not too nice to the boys. And you go, I'm sorry, what? I am not, right? I am just pushing the women so that they can do better. And we have to have that conversation. But interestingly, and there's evidence for this because it's over coffee, it's not in my office, it's not in your office, it's not in a corridor, and there's no minutes, right? No one's going, statistically, you will change your behaviors because of that cup of coffee conversation. I had to have one with a boss recently who I worked with and got on very well because the students wanted to report him for racism because he worked with a scrub nurse. He'd known this scrub nurse for about 20-something years. And every morning in the team brief, he would speak to her in a mock African accent. And the students hated it. And they told me, and they were like, just so you know, we're going to report Mr. So-and-so because he's a racist. And I was like, he's not a racist. He's like the best boss I've ever worked with. And they were like, watch him tomorrow. And he did it. I was like, shit. So I said, boss, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And we went for this cup of coffee, and I said, are you aware you do this every morning? And he was like, fuck off. I was like, no, really, you do, right? And he said, no, but it's different. I've known her for like 20 years. I'm actually a godfather to her children. She was at my wedding. She calls me like her vanilla something or another. It's awful. And he was like, and I give her a hard time back, right? And I was like, no one else in that room, including me, knows that. All they see is a big white guy doing racist stuff. And he literally was like, fuck. I've been doing this for years. Does everyone think I'm a racist? And I was like, well, I don't think so. I think most people actually have ignored it, but now we have this community of speaking out and blah, blah, blah. Cup of coffee. What's interesting is if you read the rest of the paper, it says if that fails, right? So if his response or if your response, I'm picking on you because you're in my line of sight, I'm sure you're lovely and not in any way sexist, right? So if your response is like, fuck you, you don't know, right? I'm treating the women the way they need to be treated so that they can beat all of you. Fuck you. I go, okay. And then I get another report. So we have another conversation, but this time it's not over a cup of coffee. This time it's in a formal setting. Can we have a talk? I've sent you a calendar invitation. We need to have a talk about this. And you tell me to go fuck myself again. So then there's another escalation where I go, not only are you doing this, but you need some remediation now. You need extra training. And this has been escalated to other people now know what's going on. And you go on the How Not to Be Sexist course, and you come back and you tell me to go fuck myself. And the next step is someone higher than me, someone very important, a clinical director, a chief executive, going, stop it or I'll fire you. And actually what they found in this paper is that the numbers going up drastically drop, right? So 99% of all people change after this cup of coffee, right? And it's changed the way I have difficult conversations with people. I've had to change it because obviously now if I ever ask anyone if they want a coffee, they're like, what did I fucking do? But 99% of people change their behaviors with a cup of coffee. And obviously then you've got smaller and smaller numbers. What they found is if you still didn't change after that final tip of the pyramid, right? Where like the most important person in your unit goes, I will fire you if you don't stop. They had about 80 people in their study who were that. And of those 80 people, 20 of them had organic pathology, either psychiatric or intracranial pathology, because basically, if you've had all of these interventions and you still won't change, there's something intrinsically wrong with you, right? So a colleague has said, you're upsetting people, you're being a kind of an asshole. And then a colleague or a boss has gone, you really do need to stop it. And then a colleague or boss has gone, you need to stop it, we're sending you on a course because people are getting worried about you. And then the person who runs the hospital has gone, I'm going to fire you. And at that whole journey you're going, yeah, it's not me, it's them. Nah, it's not me, it's them. Nah, it's not me. So there's different levels. And what I would say is, the interesting thing about that cup of coffee technique is if you don't feel you can have that conversation, right? So you're working for me, you're my medical student, and I just keep looking down your top, right? Because I'm a dick. I wouldn't actually do that, by the way, right? But you don't feel that you can have that cup of coffee with me, right? Because I'm Professor Fleming and I'm a big dog and it's not possible. So you find an ally. You find someone a bit closer to me. Maybe that's a registrar, maybe that's another consultant, maybe that's a nurse that you feel you can talk to. And they have that conversation with me and they use the same method and it works very well. Because actually, sometimes it is those little things, those little terms, right? So that's why I started this conversation with, if I say stuff wrong, call me out on it. But even that takes time and requires role modeling, because if I'd not said that and I kept talking about the surgeon as him, he, whatever, right? I would hope that someone would call me out on it, but if they didn't, you just all leave and go, he's full of shit. That guy he's all talk, but he's just preaching. The one thing that doesn't work, and there's pretty good evidence for it, is actually unconscious bias training in terms of the e-learning they often make people do. The only thing that really works is this, is a real conversation with people where you start to unpack where that stuff comes from and why you behave that way, because then you can make it conscious, and then you can start to do something about it. Whether that's creating a system that makes it more difficult for those behaviours to be okay, or rules them out entirely. So for example, orthopaedic selection now is nearly entirely anonymous until you get into the room, and then we have a very standardised mark sheet that makes it very hard for you to be like, I hate female surgeons, or I don't trust black people, right? Which we know exist in people. And so you can create systems as well that can challenge that. But again, that takes time, and it's often very nuanced.